February 26, 1991, just after 0200 hours. The flat desert south of Basra disappears into a wall of fog so thick it swallows headlights, silhouettes, and distance itself. You are standing inside an American M1A1 Abrams tank, its engine rumbling low, the smell of hot oil and dust mixing with cold night air forced through the ventilation system. Outside, visibility is less than 50 meters. The desert, normally open, exposed, unforgiving, has become a sealed room. Sound carries strangely, shapes appear, then vanish. Somewhere ahead, an Iraqi armored division is dug in, confident that darkness and weather have bought them time. They're wrong. Inside the turret of 2nd Armored Division, hell on wheels, commanders hunch over glowing green thermal sights. Unlike the human eye, these screens do not care about fog or night. Heat blooms in sharp white contrast, engines, bodies, metal still warm from movement hours earlier. What looks like nothing to Iraqi sentries is, to the Americans, a fully lit battlefield. Lieutenant Colonel Dan Zanini, commanding one of the forward task forces, listens to radio traffic clipped and precise. There is no shouting, no bravado, just coordinates, headings, confirmation clicks. The plan is simple and brutal. Advance through the fog, breach Iraqi defensive lines before they know an attack has begun, and annihilate anything that moves. The Iraqi division ahead, elements of a Republican Guard-supported formation, has spent days expecting an attack from the south or east in daylight. Their doctrine is built around massed fire, visual identification, and fixed positions. Their tanks, T-55s, T-62s, and a handful of T-72s sit hull down behind berms scraped from the desert floor. Infantry huddle in trenches, rifles slung, collars turned up against the cold. Officers walk the lines quietly, boots crunching sand, reassuring men that the Americans will not attack tonight. Fog, after all, blinds aircraft. Fog cancels battles. At 0212 hours, the first Iraqi forward observer reports something strange on the radio. Engine noise, low and distant, but moving. The transmission crackles with uncertainty. No visual contact, no confirmed enemy. Command tells him to wait. Moments later, the noise multiplies. Across a frontage measured in kilometers, M1A1 Abrams tanks surge forward, their turbine engines howling like aircraft on a runway. Bradleys follow close behind, autocannons locked forward, Tau missile systems primed. The American formation does not bunch up, it spreads, overlapping fields of fire, every crew trained to fight independently if communications fail. The fog thickens. An Iraqi tank commander peers through his periscope and sees nothing. He wipes condensation from the glass with a gloved hand. The night is silent again. He begins to relax. Then his tank erupts. A 120mm sabot round slams through frontal armor as if it were paper. The impact is instantaneous. White-hot metal fragments ricochet inside the turret. There is no time to scream. The tank burns from the inside out, visible only as a brief flare of heat on American thermals. The Iraqi line does not realize it has been hit. Abrams crews fire, shift, fire again. Every shot is deliberate. Every target is already identified before the trigger is pulled. Tanks die without knowing who killed them. Crews abandon vehicles, only to be swallowed by fog and darkness, running in the wrong direction, shouting warnings no one can see or understand. Iraqi commanders try to form a response. Radios light up with overlapping voices, reports of explosions, of invisible attackers, of units losing contact with neighboring battalions. Orders are given, then contradicted. Someone calls for artillery, but the fire direction center cannot get a fix. Without visual reference, shells fall wide, exploding harmlessly in empty sand. American Bradleys push closer now. Their 25mm Bushmaster cannons hammer trenches, walking fire down defensive lines that were never meant to be assaulted unseen. Infantry fighting vehicles disgorge soldiers who move like shadows, flares hissing briefly before vanishing into mist. For the Iraqis, the fog becomes a weapon turned against them. Every doctrine they rely on, visual spotting, layered defense, coordinated fire, collapses. Tanks that try to maneuver collide with berms or other vehicles. Some reverse straight into minefields laid days earlier, forgotten in the confusion. By 300 hours, entire Iraqi battalions have ceased to exist as organized units. From above, unseen and unheard, Apache AH-64 helicopters loiter at the edge of the fog, waiting for breaks in the cloud to strike fleeing vehicles. Fixed-wing aircraft circle farther out, weapons already loaded, pilots watching infrared displays that show the battlefield glowing like a map of dying stars. On the ground, an Iraqi major stands beside a command vehicle, handset pressed to his ear, demanding reports that never come. His division is still on paper, on the map. In reality, it is dissolving into heat signatures and wreckage. The fog does not lift. The attack does not slow. And the Iraqi division is about to learn what it means to fight an enemy who can see you when you cannot see them at all. By 03:15 a.m., Iraqi command networks are breaking apart faster than the vehicles on the line. Inside a hastily dug command bunker, a senior Iraqi brigade commander stares at a map illuminated by a red-filtered lamp. The grid lines are neat. Unit symbols are still in place. According to the map, his division holds firm. According to reality, entire companies are already burning less than a kilometer away. His radio operator keeps calling call signs that answer only with static. What no one in the bunker understands yet is that this is not a probing attack. This is not harassment fire. The U.S. 2nd Armored Division has driven directly into the heart of the Iraqi defensive belt and is tearing it apart from the inside, using speed and confusion as weapons as deadly as any shell. On the forward slope of an Iraqi berm, a T-72 crew finally spots movement, dark shapes materializing briefly in the fog. The gunner traverses his turret by instinct, not sight. He fires a high-explosive round at a guessed position. The shell disappears into the mist and detonates harmlessly. Before he can reload, his thermal image blooms white, and Abrams fires first. The Iraqi tank's turret lifts several centimeters from its ring before slamming back down, jammed. Flames pour from hatches. Ammunition cooks off in a violent chain reaction, the explosion muffled by fog but unmistakable. Nearby crews hear it, and panic spreads. Engines start. Vehicles move without orders. That movement seals their fate. American tank commanders are not looking for flashes or silhouettes. They are hunting heat. Every running engine is a beacon. Every fleeing vehicle is easier to track than a stationary one. Sabot rounds punch through side armor at ranges Iraqi crews were taught were impossible. Some Iraqi units attempt to counterattack blindly, charging forward in the direction of the noise. They crest low ridgelines and drive straight into overlapping American kill zones. One platoon loses all 4 tanks in under 40 seconds. Others attempt to withdraw. The desert turns against them. In the fog, navigation becomes guesswork. Vehicles drift off planned routes, bunch up or follow the wrong tracks, sometimes straight towards American formations moving in parallel. Brief, savage engagements erupt at point-blank range. Abrams crews fire instinctively, trusting training and thermal outlines more than distance. Inside one Bradley, a young American gunner grips the controls as targets appear faster than he can call them out. The Bushmaster cannon roars, stitching trenches with explosive shells. Iraqi soldiers bolt from cover, some dropping weapons, some raising hands, too late to be seen. The fog hides surrender as effectively as it hides attack. Above the battlefield, commanders monitoring feeds begin to realize the scale of what is happening. What was expected to be a tough night fight is becoming a rout. Reports come in, enemy armor destroyed, command posts overrun, resistance collapsing in pockets rather than lines. At 0400 a.m., Iraqi divisional headquarters attempts to reassert control. Orders go out for units to regroup on secondary defensive positions farther north. The message reaches almost no one. Relay stations are gone. Vehicles that could carry orders are destroyed or fleeing. Junior officers act independently, some trying to fight, others simply trying to survive until dawn. Dawn never comes for them. As the fog thickens again, American forces push deeper. Supply trucks are bypassed or destroyed. Artillery pieces are found abandoned. Crews vanished into the night. In one sector, an entire Iraqi battalion is discovered still in its trenches, weapons untouched, officers gone, men frozen by confusion and fear, unsure whether the sounds around them are friendly or enemy. By now, the phrase begins circulating quietly over American radios. They've disappeared. Not retreated, not regrouped, vanished. The Iraqi division that was supposed to blunt the armored thrust towards Basra is no longer a coherent force. It exists only as scattered survivors, burning wrecks, and unanswered call signs. And still, the U.S. 2nd Armored Division keeps moving, methodical, disciplined, unstoppable, advancing through fog towards an enemy that no longer knows where it is, or even if it still exists. The night is not over. Just before 500 hours, the fog begins to thin in uneven patches, revealing flashes of devastation that no Iraqi commander is left to control. Wrecked tanks sit at impossible angles, turrets twisted or blown clear. Tracks are torn loose and wrapped around drive wheels like discarded chains. The desert floor is scarred by overlapping tread marks, shell craters, and blackened earth where fuel fires burned themselves out in minutes. In some places, bodies lie where crews tried to escape, outlines barely visible beneath settling dust. This is what happens when doctrine collapses faster than men can adapt. The Iraqi Armored Division had been trained to fight set-piece battles, units aligned, ranges measured, fields of fire planned in daylight. Command flowed downward, initiative flowed upward only with permission. In fog and darkness, that structure becomes a prison. When the top goes blind, the bottom freezes. The Americans fight differently. Tank commanders now stand half-exposed in their hatches, despite the cold, scanning through thermals and night optics, talking constantly over the radio. Platoons shift formation fluidly. When resistance is met, units peel off and bypass, leaving isolated pockets to be dealt with later by follow-on forces. Near a shallow wadi, an Iraqi company makes its last stand almost by accident. Several tanks and armored vehicles converge there after losing contact with higher command. Their officers decide to hold and wait for daylight, believing American forces will halt in fog. They are wrong again. Abrams tanks appear as pale shapes through thinning mist, engines throttling down as they fan out. The engagement is brutal and short. American gunners engage from standoff range, firing through smoke and residual fog with machine precision. Iraqi return fire is sporadic and poorly aimed. Within minutes, the wadi is a graveyard of metal. One Iraqi tank manages to score a hit. An RPG strikes the side of an Abrams, exploding in a flash of light and dust. The American tank shudders, armor blackened, but continues forward without slowing. The psychological effect is devastating. The Iraqis had been told these machines were vulnerable. They are not. By now, Apache helicopters move in closer, darting through breaks in the fog like predators. Hellfire missiles streak downward, striking fleeing vehicles on desert roads that glow hot on infrared displays. Trucks carrying ammunition explode in cascading fireballs, lighting the horizon in brief, surreal flashes. At 0530 hours, the last meaningful Iraqi command node goes silent. What remains of the division is no longer fighting as a division. It is not even fighting as battalions. Small groups scatter north, south, anywhere away from the sound of turbines and cannon fire. Some throw weapons aside and walk. Others hide in wreckage, waiting for daylight or capture. American commanders begin shifting priorities. The mission is no longer simply to break the line, it is to prevent escape. Blocking positions are established. Artillery units roll forward, firing illumination and precision strikes where movement is detected. Engineers mark lanes through minefields so armor can continue advancing without pause. As the first gray hint of dawn approaches, the fog finally begins to lift. What it reveals is not a battlefield, it is an absence. Where intelligence estimates predicted a full Iraqi armored division, there are only wrecks, prisoners, and silence. Entire defensive belts have been erased in a single night. The road towards Basra lies open, defended only by scattered remnants who no longer have the ability to resist in force. An American battalion commander surveys the field through binoculars, shaking his head slowly. He has fought in exercises for years, trained for worst-case scenarios, prepared for heavy losses. This was not that. The Iraqi division did not withdraw. It did not break and run in a traditional sense. It was swallowed by fog, by technology, and by an enemy who never gave it the chance to understand what was happening. As the sun rises higher, helicopters begin ferrying prisoners to the rear. Medical teams move among the wreckage. Engineers clear routes for the next phase of the advance. The battle is over. The war is not. February 26, 1991. Shortly after sunrise. The desert south of Basra finally reveals what the night concealed. As daylight spreads across the sand, American soldiers move cautiously among the wreckage, weapons still raised, eyes scanning for anything that might move. Smoke columns rise lazily into the morning sky. Burned-out Iraqi tanks sit frozen mid-maneuver, some facing the wrong direction, others clustered tightly together as if seeking protection from one another. They never found it. Prisoners emerge slowly from trenches and wrecked vehicles, exhausted, filthy, eyes wide with disbelief. Many are young. Some are older reservists pulled into service late in the war. They ask the same question again and again through translators, their voices hoarse. Where did you come from? The Americans do not have an answer that makes sense to them. In the early light, recovery teams begin counting the damage. The numbers climb steadily. Dozens of tanks destroyed, armored personnel carriers shattered, artillery pieces abandoned intact. Ammunition stocks lie untouched in places, crews gone without firing a single round. Maps recovered from command vehicles showed planned fields of fire that were never used. One U.S. intelligence officer studies them quietly and realizes something chilling. The Iraqi division did everything it was trained to do, except see. That is why it died. Officers from the 2nd Armored Division gather for quick briefings beside their vehicles, helmets off now, faces streaked with grime and fatigue. Losses are astonishingly light, a handful of damaged vehicles, few wounded, no catastrophic penetrations. The night fight, one of the most dangerous forms of armored warfare, has ended in near total dominance. The fog had been expected to slow the advance. Instead, it became the final advantage. Reports flow upward through coalition command. The phrase spreads beyond the division, beyond Corps headquarters, eventually reaching Washington. An Iraqi division ceased to exist overnight. Not destroyed in days, not attrited over weeks, erased in hours. Farther north, surviving Iraqi units hear rumors of what happened. Stories spread faster than facts, of tanks that see through darkness, of shells that strike from nowhere, of divisions disappearing without warning. Morale collapses in places not yet touched by American forces. Some units abandon positions preemptively, others surrender at the first contact. The psychological shock ripples outward, accelerating the collapse of the entire southern front. By mid-morning, the U.S. 2nd Armored Division is already moving again. Engines start, columns reform. The pause is brief, just long enough to refuel, rearm, and mark the dead. The road to Basra remains open, and higher command will not allow momentum to fade. As tanks roll forward, crews glance back one last time at the battlefield behind them. In daylight, it looks unreal, too quiet, too still, as if the night never happened. But the evidence is everywhere. Twisted steel, scorched sand, and the empty space where a division once stood. The fog has lifted. The lesson remains. As the 2nd Armored Division pushes north, the battlefield they leave behind begins to transform from a place of violence into a case study. Liaison officers, intelligence analysts, and after-action teams move through the wreckage with notebooks and cameras, documenting what happened in those unseen hours of the night. They are not just counting destroyed tanks. They are trying to understand why an entire Iraqi division collapsed so completely. The answer lies not in bravery or cowardice, but in asymmetry. American crews had fought inside a system, thermal imaging, GPS navigation, secure radios, flexible command, that allowed them to operate even when sight, terrain, and certainty were stripped away. Iraqi units fought inside a hierarchy that required visibility, centralized orders, and synchronization. When fog severed those links, initiative vanished with them. One U.S. major interviewed days later describes it simply. They were fighting the weather, we weren't. Captured Iraqi officers confirm it in fragments. Some believed they were under air attack the entire night, unable to distinguish ground fire from explosions. Others thought friendly units were firing on them. Several admit they never knew which direction the Americans were coming from, only that destruction followed sound and heat. The fog had turned every assumption inside out. For the coalition, the engagement becomes a turning point in understanding modern warfare. Night is no longer neutral. Weather is no longer protection. The battlefield belongs to whoever can sense, decide, and act faster, regardless of what the human eye can perceive. News of the vanished division filters into global media in simplified form, headlines about overwhelming technology, about tanks that see in the dark. But among soldiers, the story is told differently. They talk about discipline, about restraint, about training that held when confusion should have ruled. They remember moments when targets appeared suddenly at close range, when a single move could have meant friendly fire or disaster. They remember holding fire until positive identification, even when adrenaline screamed to shoot. That restraint mattered, because not every heat signature was hostile. Civilians wandered unknowingly near combat zones. Disoriented Iraqi soldiers surrendered in clusters, dropping weapons and kneeling in the sand, terrified and grateful to be alive. The night could have become chaos. Instead, it became control. By the time the ground war ends days later, the Iraqi military is shattered beyond repair. The fog battle south of Basra is no longer an isolated event. It is a symbol, proof that future wars will not wait for daylight, clarity, or fairness. Years later, armored officers still study the engagement. They point to it when explaining why training never stops, why technology must be understood, not worshipped, and why doctrine must bend or break. Because somewhere in that fog, a line was crossed, a moment when warfare changed permanently. The Iraqi division did not just lose a battle, it vanished into history.